Hi everyone, we are Group 6 and our presentation focuses on Borderlands as identity, specifically the emotional and cultural experience of living between the US and Mexico. When most people hear the word border, they picture a physical line or checkpoint. But for many Chicanos and Mexican Americans, the border is something you carry inside you. It shapes the language you speak, how you present yourself, what parts of your culture you show or hide, and how connected you feel to family or community. This presentation is really about the experience of being in between two worlds, where neither side fully feels like home on its own, but together they create a unique identity that is deep and meaningful. So when we talk about Borderlands, we're not just talking about the literal borderline that separates Mexico and the US. The borderlands are really a social and cultural space. They're shaped by movement of people, languages, traditions, and identities. People in borderlands grow up learning how to navigate what can feel like two different worlds at the same time. For example, you might speak Spanish with your family at home, but English at school or work. You might cook traditional food, but also love American fast food. You might celebrate holidays in ways that mix both cultures. So, the borderlands aren't just a physical place, they're a lived experience where identity is constantly shifting and adapting, and that can create both connection and confusion at the same time. There's a phrase that really captures this feeling, ni de aquí, ni de allá, which means not from here, not from there. It's something a lot of Mexican Americans hear or say at some point. You can feel like you don't fully fit in either place. In the US, people might label you as too Mexican, but when you go to Mexico, people may say you're too American. That can create a sense of being in between, of not belonging fully anywhere. But what's interesting is that this experience can also become a source of identity on its own. Instead of choosing one side, people learn to build a blended identity that honors both cultures. So, ni de aquí, ni de allá doesn't just express disconnection. It also reflects the reality of creating something new in the middle. Gloria Anzaldúa was a Chicana feminist writer who helped give language to this in-between identity. In her book, Borderlands, La Frontera, she explains that the border isn't just physical. It exists in the mind and spirit, shaping how a person understands themselves. She described the borderlands as a space where identities don't have to be fixed. She introduced the idea of Nepantla, which means being in a transitional or in-between space. Instead of forcing yourself to choose one way of being, you learn to exist with multiple identities at once. So, in Anzaldua's view, the borderlands are actually a place of creativity and possibility, not just conflict. Identity becomes something fluid, something we actively shape rather than something we inherit fully from one side.
One of the clearest examples of borderland identity shows up in language. Many people in border communities use Spanglish or switch between languages depending on who they're talking to. This is called code switching, and it becomes a natural part of everyday life. But language also carries emotion. Some people get judged for having an accent or for not speaking Spanish well enough, even if they grew up with Mexican culture. Others may feel pressure to hide their Spanish in certain environments to sound more professional. So language becomes more than just how we communicate. It becomes a sign of belonging, pride, insecurity, memory, and identity. The way someone speaks can tell you a lot about the what worlds they're moving between. The border shape shows up in everyday life, in food, in music, slang, and even humor. People grow up hearing Mexican sayings mixed with American references. They celebrate holidays like Dia de los Muertos and the 4th of July. They listen to music that blends banda, cumbias, hip hop, corridos, and R&B. Even family structures reflect blending. Extended families play a big role. Traditions are passed down across distance, and community is often built around shared cultural memory. So, for many people in the borderlands, blending isn't something they think about consciously, it's just normal life. Immigration affects family relationships in deep ways. Some families are spread out across countries. Some people can visit freely, and others can't because of paperwork, distance, or money. This creates a feeling of home existing in two places at once. You may have important memories, foods, or traditions from a place you can't easily return to, and that can cause homesickness or identity conflict, like feeling connected to somewhere you weren't raised in, or feeling American but not being seen as American enough. The emotional side of immigration is something that many borderland families carry, even after generations. It's also important to recognize that border identity isn't just defined by struggle. People in border communities create new forms of culture, new ways of expressing themselves, and new identities that don't exist anywhere else. This blending becomes a source of strength. People learn to adapt, navigate multiple environments, and build community across differences. So, identity in Borderlands isn't only about loss, it's also about creativity, resilience, and pride.
These images show what this culture looks like in real life. The murals on the border wall show pride, memory, and resistance. Artists use the wall not just as a barrier, but as a canvas for identity. Street markets in places like Tijuana show how languages, foods, and styles mix together in everyday life. You'll see stalls selling traditional crafts, spices, snacks, toys, and clothing, all while music plays and multiple languages are spoken at once. And food like these tacos represents how culture travels. Recipes and flavors are carried across generations and adapted wherever people settle. Together, these images show that the borderlands aren't just about separation, they're about connection, creativity, and community life. So now we want to bring this to our own lives. Even if you're not from the border, most of us have experienced being in between identities or expectations. That could look like acting one way at home and another at school, speaking differently with friends versus family, feeling torn between cultural expectations, or just feeling like you're constantly switching roles. So take a second to think about a moment where you felt in between, something such as identity, language, culture, family expectations, or even personality. We'd like everyone to share a short reflection. What did it feel like, and what did it teach you about yourself? As a group, one of the biggest things we realize is that borders are not just physical lines on a map. The border exists in people's experiences, their language, relationships, and even how they see themselves. So when we talk about the borderlands, we're really talking about a living space, one that shows identity every day. We also learned that identity in the borderlands is not a simple or fixed. People move between cultures, expectations, and roles all the time. And instead of that being something that weakens identity, it actually makes it more layered and adaptive. There isn't just one right way to be Mexican or Mexican American or even American. Identity in these spaces is something people build and rebuild throughout lives. Another important piece we discussed is how much creativity and resilience exists in border communities. Even when people face challenges like discrimination, language pressure, or cultural misunderstanding, they still find ways to express pride, joy, and belonging. That can be seen in food, music, celebrations, art, and the way families stay connected across distances. So instead of viewing the border as only a place of conflict, We now understand it's a place of strength, culture blending, and emotional depth. The borderland are a reminder that identity doesn't have to fit neatly into one category. It can be flexible, shared, and proudly in between. We based our presentation on week 5 lectures and readings, including Gloria Anzula's Borderlands Theory and course discussion on transnational identity.